Hi, I'm Rob Aldrich with DevFactory, and today I'm going to show you how simple it is to leverage DevSpaces to develop with a Ruby on Rails and MySQL stack. DevSpaces is the platform that makes it easy for every organization to adopt Docker. By dockerizing your development environment, and then performing code changes and testing inside the Docker container, promoting that container to testing and production environments is a simple next step. To create a DevSpace, we need both a Docker file that describes how to build the Docker image and a DevSpaces YAML file that describes our DevSpace and indicates what ports to expose and what environment variables to pass in. In the next few minutes, I'll show you how to create a DevSpace, set it up to sync with my local directory, start my application within the DevSpace, and make some small code changes to demonstrate what it's like to develop and test in DevSpaces. Finally, when you're ready to try DevSpaces out for free, click the link below and sign up for our free Dockerization service. We'll Dockerize your development environment for you. Let's jump into the demo. First, let's look at our project. You can use whatever IDE you'd like, as DevSpaces works directly with your local file system and doesn't need to be integrated with your development environment. The next step is to create our DevSpace. A DevSpace can be set up from a downloadable public Docker image or from a set of custom Docker files. If you don't have a lot of experience with Docker, it isn't a problem. DevFactory provides free Dockerization services for DevSpaces customers to get you going. Our project already has Docker configuration files created, and that's all we need to get our DevSpace up and running. We can see them here. In our example, the DevSpaces YAML file is a configuration file for our DevSpace. You'll see our DevSpace is going to be called Ruby, and that our application is exposing port 3000 for use with the web server. Creating the DevSpace is simple. Navigate to the folder containing this configuration file, then simply run the DevSpaces create command. This will take a few minutes. Afterward, your DevSpace will be ready to use. You can track the progress of DevSpaces on the site by clicking the refresh button. As it's being set up, the DevSpace status will go through multiple states. When it's finished, it will change to stopped. Now that our DevSpace is set up, we need to start it. If it's the first time running this DevSpace, we'll also need to bind the code directory. When we bind our code directory, DevSpaces keeps everything on our local workstation synchronized with our DevSpace in the cloud so that we can see changes there in real time. Back at the command prompt, we simply type DevSpaces start and the name of our DevSpace. So far, we've provided a Docker file. Within our configuration, we referenced this file, named our DevSpace, and exposed port 3000 for use with our application. DevSpaces will now build our container, start it up, and generate URLs to map this port. All of the configuration to start a complete development environment is now versioned with the rest of our source code and can easily be launched by anyone on our team. Let's get back to our demo. Once the status of your DevSpace is running, we're ready to bind. At the command prompt, we need to navigate to the root code directory. Once there, we simply type DevSpaces bind and the name of our DevSpace. At this point, our codebase will begin syncing with our DevSpace. Depending on the size of your repository, this could take a few minutes, but after this first time, only changes are sent. Things are kept synchronized in real time. Now that we're all set up, we can connect to the DevSpace and start our web server. To connect, all we need to do is type DevSpaces exec and the name of our DevSpace. You'll notice that the command prompt changes. You're now running commands within your DevSpace in the cloud. A special directory named Data has been set up. If you navigate to this directory, you can see that all of your code has been synchronized. Any changes you make to your local codebase will be reflected here while your DevSpace is running. To demonstrate this, let's start our web server in the cloud and run our project. In our example, we can start the web server by running the startup script. Now the web server is running in the cloud. DevSpaces has mapped the exposed port 3000 to its HTTP services and provides a link. You can find this by clicking Actions and then Edit, View Config from the DevSpaces site, or by running DevSpaces info from the command line. You can see the Ruby on Rails application is running, and if you go to the dogs URL, you can see that there are 3 dogs listed. These records are read from the MySQL database, which is also running within your DevSpace. Now let's go back to our local development environment. If we navigate to Views, Dogs, Index.html, we find the source for our dogs page. We can make changes here, save them locally, and then if we go back to our DevSpaces site, we see that our local changes have been synced and reflected there. No development environment integration is required. Once you've bound your DevSpace and it's running, the lightweight DevSpaces client works in the background to automatically keep your local code synchronized with your DevSpace. Likewise, anything added to the data folder in your DevSpace flows back through the client and is reflected in your local project. Now that we're running our environment on the fastest machines in the cloud, we spend less time waiting and have shorter development iterations. It's simple and fast. So, in less than 5 minutes, we were able to set up the infrastructure, run, and test a complete Ruby on Rails web application with a MySQL database from scratch. Thanks for your time. If you found this video useful, please click like below and check out our other videos.